speaking of offensive line, speaking of running game, I want to get into a couple pieces of that real quick here, and then talk a little defense, and we can get into some hockey. Last week we talked about the offensive line, the position battles that seem to be more left versus right, but depth is developing there, and it's exciting. We've talked about needing 10 offensive linemen, not 5, and the coaches continue to mention some of these other names, and it's intriguing what's happening there. I think the story of the week has probably been Myles Hinton, who at this point, I mean, he's the left tackle, right? This isn't even, it is a competition. He's got to win the job, but it's very clear they want Myles Hinton to be the left tackle.
Yep.
He said some things today about how he feels with his comfort level at that spot. He looked noticeably thinner to me in the media appearance today as well. So he's healthy. We know the coaches have had the same line on him for a little while now, which is his potential is sky high, like one of the best tackles in the country, sky high. We've seen him do flashes of those kinds of plays. He's just got to do it every time. He's just got to get consistent.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I mean, he looked today. He said today that he's far more comfortable at left than he was at right. He played left in high school, played left 1 year at Stanford before they bumped him over to right, and that's kind of where he's stayed ever since. But Michigan knocked him back to left, and by all accounts, he's looking really, really good. As you mentioned, I mean, looks noticeably thinner. I mean, even in just this photo alone, you're talking noticeably thinner and more built. And again, credit to the Michigan Strength and Conditioning program. It just keeps churning out studs that can, that they're built. They're built, and I definitely think he's got all the potential in the world. And, he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. I mean, they don't just give out 5 stars to anyone. So there's definitely, a baseline there. And I don't think he's anything close to that baseline yet. And I'm almost ready to kind of write him in pen and at left tackle. The right tackle is kind of where things get a little more interesting. But again, like left, there's a lot to like there. It just kind of turns out and ends up being who is going to take that right tackle spot. And they have options, which is good. I think that you can kind of say that for pretty much every spot on the offensive line is that they have options. I mean, center, you've got Raheem Anderson. You're hoping that you don't dip into Jake Guarnera. I mean, I think he needs some time to develop and stuff, but even at right tackle, and you're hearing Blake Frazier's name pop up now all of a sudden, getting a shout out. I don't think he's at the point where he's ready. I think he's going to be a very good tackle for Michigan in the future, but hearing his name pop up a couple of times, it's definitely intriguing. But again, it's like you got to really like what Michigan could have at the tackle position when you're talking about if Myles Hinton reaches his potential, and also Andrew Gentry reaching his potential too. I mean, I think ideally they want Gentry to start just because his potential is so high. Of course, Percy is good too, and he's waited his turn and is ready to. And I think they would be just fine with Percy playing at right too. But when you're talking about Gentry, they've just been salivating over this guy for years now. So, man, I mean, you've got 2 really high ceiling guys that could reach their potential this year. I think you're talking about a really good Michigan offensive line when you've got Greg Crippen in the center, who, again, could have started last year and did start at one point last year too, in place of Drake Nugent. So, again, it's kind of a lot of spots on this team is, man, if this guy reaches his potential, this could be this. It's on a lot of positions on Michigan, not just the offensive line or defensive line. I just think if Michigan can find that and dip into that talent pool, Michigan's going to be a really good team again this year with a lot of bright talent that could really step up here in the years ahead. But Gentry to me is probably the more intriguing guy on the offensive line. Preeb on the I think he's on the right, and El Hadi on the left.
We're gonna get into that because there was a little interesting nugget from Hinton on that today. But.
So again, it's there's a lot. If you can get your bookends to reach their potential and play really solid football, I think you're talking about another really solid offensive line. And by all accounts, Grant Newsome is doing a fantastic job coaching and on the recruiting trail too. So, I don't want to say Michigan lucked into having a guy like Newsome in there, but when you're going from Sharon Moore to Grant Newsome and not having any drop off there, I mean, obviously we'll find out, but I mean, I think that'd be huge.
Yeah. And, the last few weeks when we talked about this, we've all kind of agreed that the interior of the offensive line in some order is going to be Preeb, Crippen, and El Hadi. We kind of all have that written in pen. And Josh, if we run with your thought of nearly putting Miles Hinton there at left tackle in pen, that basically leaves Andrew Gentry and Jeff Percy battling for that right tackle position. And I think that would be huge for Michigan. Coming out of spring ball, obviously we don't know exactly what the staff is thinking at every moment, but if Michigan can have 4 of their 5 offensive linemen set coming out of spring ball, I think that's huge.
Yeah.
And maybe if it's not even out of spring ball, but entering into fall camp, that's big. And they definitely weren't in that spot last year. We know that for a fact. They were still moving pieces around and things like that, trying to find the right 5 guys that gelled. But from the 3 of us who cover the team, we kind of all agree that, if Miles Hinton is penned in there at left tackle, like you said, Josh, it would be almost certainly Andrew Gentry and Jeff Percy. They're battling for right tackle, which I think is just really big for Michigan. Mm-hmm. It gives you a sense of comfort almost, knowing that you're rolling in, getting close to the season, knowing at least the top 6 guys, and you just have to find the one guy out of 2 at right tackle rather than, I mean, they were moving guys all over the place last year trying to figure out who was going to be where. So that's really big in my opinion. And Trevor, if I know you were hinting at that little nugget that Miles Hinton said, but if you put up that picture that you had before.
Yeah, so that's what caught me off guard because one, every single photo we've seen has shown, I'm clicking it but not sharing it, sorry, has shown Preeb at left guard next to Hinton. And I mean, El Hadi, who is expected to be the other guard, Giovanni El Hadi, his entire tenure has been at left guard too, but Preeb started for 2 years at left guard, right? So it kind of seemed like, oh, maybe he's sliding out to the right. But yeah, Miles Hinton today said that it's been Gio next to him on the left side. Now, that said, I think there's rotation going on. Crippen, who I would almost call a lock to start at center, they've moved him to some of the guard spots. Newsome has talked about wanting to find the 5 best offensive linemen and then organize from there. While I think that's true, I do think it's pretty obvious, like we've been saying, where some guys are going to end up slotting in at. So I thought that was interesting, the note with Gio at left, because, Josh, we've also heard that Nate Afobe is a guy who's been pushing El Hadi for potentially a starting job at the guard spot. Sounds like he might be the guy, again, penciled in very early, blah, blah, blah. But he's a guy who's looking like at least maybe that 6th offensive lineman role that Michigan loves to utilize, not only in jumbo packages, but also just flexibility in terms of starting on the line.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely depth being built out. Even Amir Herring's name has been brought up a couple of times too. So there's names, and we've almost hit on 10 names. I think I haven't been paying attention, but it's pretty close to 10 names. So I think there's options there. I mean, if worst case scenario is that if Crippen if they do decide, hey, let's play Crippen at guard, Raheem Anderson can take over at center too, and they really like Raheem Anderson.
Another guy I think doesn't have a spot. Like there's just even with 6 starter level players leaving, there are still talented offensive linemen that are arguably blocked.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. So, I mean, the ultimate test is going to be, come the season time, but it really seems to like they're not just saying stuff just to say it. They're really confident in their guys. And I know Grant Newsome, he was asked about having the 10 guys, and he said, we're pretty far into this thing and of where this like depth is coming from. So and I think they have it. And I mean, who knows who their 6th guy is going to be. I mean, technically the loser of the Gentry and Percy battle could technically be the jumbo 6th guy too, on top of a Phobie. So there's depth on the depth. There's this there. You have depth for a 6th guy too, which is just crazy. So I think the offensive line was probably the one position I wasn't worried about considering the losses. I mean, you're replacing a brand new group of guys, and I think this is probably going to be one of the most important coaching jobs of Grant Newsome's career, regardless of how well he has it. But there's just a lot to like there, and they'll be adding freshmen in coming the summer too. So and there's guys like Tristan Bounds that is still out there that haven't really been mentioned, but is part of the conversation. It's just they have options, and I think that's the best case scenario for this team. And replacing so many guys is just having options, and the fact that you've got 3 or 4 guys right now that you can count on and write in pen in that starting group 2 weeks in the spring is only going to bode well for building out the rest of that line moving forward. And you can pretty much almost say the same thing for the defensive line too. I mean, there's numbers there, but it's exciting. It's exciting to think, and that's one less position you have to worry about. If a really good offensive line can make up for a lot of inefficiencies on offense, and that goes with the quarterbacks and as well as the running backs too. I mean, a really, really good offensive line can help a quarterback that's not as talented or as has this type of tools as the quarterback that you had last year. So a lot to like there. The offensive line future is exciting. I mean, even just beyond this year too. I mean, you're going to have a lot of familiar faces back. We'll have to replace guys, but the way that Michigan has been working the portal, especially on the offensive line, I mean, I have no worries about having to replace guys or plugging in guys. I just think the culture that's been established is just going to continue on with Grant Newsome, and who knows, maybe get even better.
Yeah, 2 more things I want to add really quick that you guys kind of jogged my memory while you were talking. For me personally, I think players like Nathan Afobe and Amir Herring, I'll have to see that to believe it. I just think as 2nd-year players, I can't remember if either of them redshirted or if they're true sophomores at this point, but for either of them to beat out a guy like Giovanni El-Hadi or Josh Preeb for a guard spot, or Greg Crippen, all these guys, like we've talked about all spring, these guys have waited their turn. They've been in the system for a long time. Their bodies are just more developed, I feel like, as older players rather than 2nd-year guys just, I don't know, 15 months out of high school or something, right? So that's personally where I'm at in terms of that. I'll have to see that to believe it. And if Sharon Moore wants to invite us out to a practice to see how that's working out, I'd love to go and be there for that. But
great joke.
And then going back to your comment, Josh, about the offensive line, I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you guys heard Harbaugh's comment the other day. He was talking about how the offensive line is the only position group on the field where every other position group depends on it. And If the offensive line is good, everything else has the ability to be good. But if the offensive line is bad, things will go south pretty quickly. And he said that's the only position group on the field where every other position relies on the offensive line. And I think that's pretty classic Jim Harbaugh stuff. And I think that's exactly what Sherrone Moore is thinking too. So it'll be exciting to see what happens.
Well, we've seen the success for Michigan in the last 3 years, and it's no secret. The change came from a mentality, in a lot of ways, getting back to previous Harbaugh, but on the offensive line. I want to get to the defensive side, like Josh said, but the last point I'll touch on with these guys battling at right tackle, both of them, Percy in a previous year and Gentry last year, have played multiple spots. Right, Percy got a start at left tackle, replacing Ryan Hayes in 2022. He played some right guard last year. Gentry played every spot but center last year. So these are guys that are versatile. They're athletic. Percy's been around the program for a while. You brought up Tristan Bounds too, Josh. I don't think people realize both of those dudes are huge.
Yeah,
they're big dudes, man. And again, in another program, who knows? What opportunities they would have had. Percy's a guy that people don't know a ton about, but he's really, really good. And Gentry's a guy that, look, former top 100 recruit, right? He took 2 years off, part of his mission trip. And this is year 3 he's coming into with Michigan. Now, we've said it before. He's, 23 years old, right? So he's 6'8" too, I think, or 6'7", 320 or something. I mean, these are all big athletic dudes that just need reps. And then to Brock's point, the continuity. I think that's so massive. I know they're moving some guys around right now, and we've talked about the left and right guard thing with Preeb and Ahadi and figuring this out. I'd like to see them feel pretty good, at least going into summer and definitely by fall. I don't want another bleed into the regular season with the offensive line, especially with all new starters. I think the more reps those guys get at the one, the better, especially like we said with Texas week 2. Right, you don't have a lot of time to figure things out. So